Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to On the Brightline podcast, Tales from Recovering Food Addicts from the perspective of a physician, a therapist, and an off-the-wall storyteller. We are not affiliated or endorsed by Brightline Eating, and all content presented in this podcast represents our personal opinions and does not represent medical, nutritional, or psychological professional advice.
Well, hello, and welcome to another episode of On the Brightline podcast. We are again via Zoom because we have a very special guest and this evening, which we don't normally record in the evening either. So this evening, we have Maija, and Maija is coming to us from Anchorage, Alaska. I'm not going to tell too much of her story because we really want to hear from her, but she is part of the Brightline community, and we think she has a really interesting perspective. So we're excited to hear her. So Maija, if you want to introduce yourself, tell us a little about yourself, and then tell us your, Brightline eating story, how you came to the program.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thank you for having me here. I am a huge fan of this podcast, but more importantly, like as you guys as women and as just human beings in general. So being in your guys' presence is already, as someone who thrives having deep, meaningful conversation, I already know this is a very safe place. So I'll start off by saying thank you for that. But yeah, I'm Maija. I am 25 years old and I live in Anchorage, Alaska, and I'm a Brightline eater, and I'll put a period at the end of that because that's kind of why we're why we're really here. Um, I am no stranger to food addiction and to battling being my own worst enemy when it comes to food and loving myself and all the challenges that it comes with being a human being. And so I came into Brightline eating officially, kind of like that full surrender last year, May of 2023 is when I really stepped into the community and said, okay, enough is enough. I need the Brightline eating fix. I need to be around like-minded people and just to really make that change in my life to be the best, healthiest version of myself. So that really kickstarted my journey was last year. And since then it has opened, as I think for a lot of Brightline eaters, like once you get the food under control, then you kind of can start to peel back some of the layers and you start, using words like healing and growth and really diving into that. So that's kind of it's been a year of transformation and transition for me when it comes to that. And some other little facts, I work in the social work field. So I live my work life is very stressful. I work with a very beautiful but vulnerable population that comes with its own, gambit of emotions when it comes to my work life. So it's social work Maija and then authentic home Maija. They're two different people. So I'm learning to love both of them, but also, to work with both as well. So yeah.
Robin, Bonny, do you guys have any questions thus far?
Yeah, I'm curious about whether your social work kind of helped open up your entry into dealing with food addiction. In other words, did you feel like you came to it through a realization through the work you're doing, or do you feel like it was just totally separate from that?
I think I can understand addiction so much better because I'm working with, individuals who, deal with their own forms of addiction. And I think there's that piece of it definitely offered me like an outside perspective of, oh, this is what it could be like. This is where I could end up if I don't put in the work and to really, use Brightline eating is kind of my form of healing. So it's definitely one and the same. I think that it offers, my work life offers perspective for Brightline eating, and Brightline eating offers perspective on my work. And I think that, I can do my job, my very challenging job, because I'm not focusing on food and because I'm not worried about, what other people are thinking of me or what I'm doing. Like I truly can be present in my job because of Brightline eating, which is amazing. Yeah.
Well, I want to know what the crucible moment was. You said that you came in all the way in and surrendered, and I want to know what was leading up to that. Tell me that story.
Yeah. I think it's called slight line eating, right? In the community. So I did that. My beautiful mom, who is one of my heroes in life, is a Brightline eater. And she is in the community as well. And so she was the
I'm gonna
one.
shout out to Shelly right now.
Yeah,
Go
shout out to
Shelly!
Shelly. She's amazing. Um, but she did it. I was in my early 20s. I think I was 20, 21 years old at the time, and she had done it. She had kind of gone off on her own path, didn't tell anyone, and did her food. And as someone who has struggled all my life, I mean, I was in like Weight Watchers, I have restricted eating, I have done the calorie and macro count, like it all. I feel like I've done it all. And there's probably still more out there that I haven't touched. But so it wasn't until kind of seeing my mom where that curiosity sparked. And so I did slight line eating for, probably a few years, I would say 2, 3 years, and lost a ton of weight. I got to like my littlest, tiniest self. But it wasn't that gradual into maintenance dance that we so crave in Brightline eating. And so I got down to very low weight, very unhealthy weight. And then I was like, oh, I got it now. Like I'm good to go. I'm healed. I can be just like everyone else. Of course, that story, I haven't heard a story that ends happily when we say those words. So kind of just veered off and started doing intuitive eating and dabbling in this and that and adding working out back in, and of course gained all of the weight back and more. So my crucible moment was after a bachelorette party, my worst binge ever. And it was just one of those scary moments where it's like it was almost an out of body experience for me, where I knew what I was doing and I could identify in that moment, like I am harming myself with food. And there's a part of me that is just screaming for me to stop, but I can't. So that was kind of my wake up moment where it was like, I am not like everyone else. I don't have that cue to stop eating. I don't have that cue to make smart choices in this moment. So the next day I called my mom and I said, enough is enough. I feel like I've had enough lived experience in these 24 years of life of mine at the time, and I'm ready to just come in. And she said, okay. And she didn't ask any questions and she held my hand. And I made that financial leap when it comes to being a Bright Lifer, which helped too for me at the time. And so that was kind of my big moment. And then being where I'm at now, where I'm by myself in Anchorage, kind of seeking that independence was also part of it, because I didn't want to be sad all the time, because this being in this stage of life in your 20s can be so overwhelming and stressful, and I didn't want to live like that. I didn't want to be stressed out and anxious and sad all the time, and so that was kind of Brightline eating was my key, my answered prayer to being authentic and sturdy and stable in myself. And I haven't looked back since. I'm not perfect by any means. I would say that like that's a part of my story as well. I'm not a crystal vaser, but I've been able to over time just get my ceiling so much higher to where when I do break my lines or something will happen or life gets lifey, I can resume and I can have the tools now to come right back and know that I'm okay. I will be okay. So yeah, that was kind of my big where it's been. I think it happened rather quickly for me. Like once I was ready, I was at that like rock bottom, burnt out, like I was ready to go and I was going to throw my all in it, and have just continued to do that. Yeah.
That is awesome. What did you lean into for support? How did you find your support system?
Yeah. I did my first introduction into the Facebook community. I was like shaking, crying, like it was the most dramatic thing I've ever done in my life, because it was a part of that surrender piece where I was like, okay, I am saying I am here. I am a food addict. My name is Maija, and it was so scary for me. But of course, per the Brightline eating community, they came in and wrapped me in their arms. And since then, it's been little things like that. I'm a part of, this is where I met Meagan, is the Bright and Friendly group, that they are amazing too. I found myself with an amazing buddy who's also in her 20s as well. So we get to kind of navigate this stage of our life with food, but also like life in general. Like it's not always about food that we're talking about. Sometimes, we're talking about hormones, we're talking about relationships, we're talking about life. And then we have that like accountability piece with food and making commitments. And then I would say the big one, I do keep my support right now. I know that that's one part of my program that I need to up is my support, but right now it's the huge one is my mom too. Like as cheesy and cute as it is, my mom, she has helped me incredibly, and she's kind of like I would say a stand-in guide for me as I navigate kind of coming into maintenance and just support in general. So she's the one that's tapped me at any time I'm like, Mom, I need, this is kind of what I'm thinking for support. She's like, oh, I have, 5 people on my list that I can send your way. And of course, like in that moment, they come running with, again, open arms. So those are my big ones. And then since kind of being in the community, I'm finding that there are other people or other Brightline eaters who are my age as well, who are kind of coming forward and
Okay,
seeking.
whoa.
Yeah.
Let's stop here right now. I want to talk about this. Like, I want to dig in because as a 43-year-old, I feel young in the community, in the official community sometimes. So I cannot imagine, and I do know a few other people who are, your age and younger in the program, but I do know that there is a I've heard described a loneliness because there are not people in your stage of life, or not as many people in your stage of life. So I guess I kind of want to talk about that, and like how do you find other people who are, in the same stage of life as you are?
Yeah, I would say definitely in the Brightline eating community, I have not found probably nearly as enough of people coming forth who are my age or who are in their 20s and early 30s. I would say that that's a part, and I think Susan Pierce Thompson just put out like a TikTok or something that just talked about this, that for my age range, we are a small number, like small number of them. So it is intimidating coming into the community at this age, because it's kind of like I feel like it's like a seesaw effect of like some days I'm like, oh my gosh, look at these like 80-year-olds who are doing this program and rocking it and they're at their healthiest. And then at the other end, I'm like, oh my God, I have to do this for 60 more years. Like, how is that even possible? So it is like, it's
oh, okay. Jeez. That's amazing. Okay. Yeah, let's talk about that. No, I'm just kidding.
I hadn't thought that, right? The part of the program of I'm just going to do this today because thinking about I'm going to have to do it. And when you see people that are just doing it forever, it's I didn't think about that being intimidating too.
It's intimidating and encouraging. Like it truly just depends on the day, the part that's active. And most days it's more encouraging to be like, okay, I'm in it for the long haul, but I don't have to feed that narrative. It's just like you said, like today I will be bright. Like today I'm choosing to be bright, and that's enough. Because I think that's a part of the program too, is just staying grounded, staying present is kind of the only way we can truly take one day at a time. So, I side tangent on that one for sure when I came into that.
So do you feel like more people your age in the outside outside the official community or outside the paid member community?
Yes, I would definitely say that outside of the actual paid membership is where people are kind of dabbling in. I found a couple people on Instagram. I have a page that I like to post my food. I'm not as regularly as I would like to, but I found some people kind of in that Instagram community, social media platforms. So that's kind of where I found people, but it's also really hard because I think at this stage, like we think that we're so busy and it's really hard to connect, and you're seeking that like meaningful connection, but it's just hard at this age to do that. So I think that that's another reason too of like being on this podcast of like, I'm here and I would love to meet new people and have people come forth and also to have conversations because I have friends who are outside of the community who it's, that are focusing on, their health and mental health, physical health, food and all of that, that we can have these conversations. And then I have friends who I'm like, oh my gosh, you would benefit so much from you just a fraction of what Brightline eating is. So it's that topic comes up a lot for sure. Yeah.
Robin, I felt like you were going to say something earlier.
Well, I totally get that struggle of being a 20 something and signing up for Brightline for the rest of your life, right? But it's that idea of it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah.
And that I love that you've been able to find people that have been so supportive to you. What have you heard from other people in their 20s as a barrier to jumping in for Brightline?
Yeah. I think that the biggest thing right now probably would be like that restrictive piece that people see. And I think I would say I was, for one, like I threw a fit for the first couple of months about, not having certain things or not being able to make exceptions. And, I think that I run my program very probably differently than most people do because I'm in an age range that it's comfortable for me to do it one way versus someone who really needs like that certainty in it. But I think that the restrictive piece about it, and then I also think that like people my age have not lived, and again this goes with what Susan Pierce Thompson says, is have had enough life experience to know that like I've tried everything, I've done everything and it's not working. And so it's that piece where it's like, oh, I'll try this, or oh, I'll eat intuitively, or oh, I'll just eat plant-based and that'll work, when really we're fighting addiction. We're fighting that need for food or not being able to stop wherever we may be on the susceptibility scale. And then I think too, naturally, the financial piece. I think it's really hard being in your 20s and being financially stable and independent. And so when you see that number, it's really intimidating as well. So that's probably my big ones. And then just lack of, I don't know that people my age are being exposed to Brightline eating per se, if it's not by kind of at random or someone else that they know. Because I'm definitely not someone who's like, I'm a Brightline eater, like you should be too, or you should, like I'm not sprinkling fairy dust over everyone to do Brightline eating. That's not my place for sure. But if they ask, it's, this is what I do and this works for me. Yeah.
I was going to ask that what surprised you most about BLE? I think you kind of had a soft start, because of your mom and everything.
Yeah.
But especially when joining the community, like what was the surprise to you?
Man, I think everyone says how welcoming it is and how, they're accepting, where like you come as you are. Like truly you come as you are and you are loved and supported regardless. I think that I knew that, but it wasn't until like stepping in that I really felt that. That was one. And then I think at an individual level, what surprised me is other areas of my life that Brightline eating has impacted. The biggest one for me is I got off of hormonal birth control about 10 months ago. And I read horror stories after horror stories about what our bodies do after getting off of it, of, that rebound effect where, you can gain weight and your emotions and your skin and all blah, blah, blah. And I had been doing Brightline eating for a solid amount of time then. And so that transition off of it was so steady and so easy for me. And now at like a hormonal level, as a 25-year-old, like I really have an understanding and control of that piece, which that surprised me, because now I'm like, oh, I'm I don't have these awful, cycles or this period that I get. It's very like controlled for me, and it surprises me every time, every time. And I think I truly do credit that to Brightline eating. Is the way it's impacted my body as well. Of just I'm the healthiest version that I've ever been, and it's maintainable. Like it's really easy. Like when you break it down too, that's probably the last thing that surprises me is like truly how easy and simple it is when you really go down to like the bones of what Brightline eating is. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, one of the things that you've kind of touched on already, but, a question that we posed is, what can you do now that you couldn't do before, or you didn't think you could do before? And I think that, there's something about when you're living this life. I mean, I could speak from my own experience. It's like once you conquer this, and not that I believe that I will always be a food addict. I've never, I'm in recovery. Like I'm never healed from this, but I have, I've conquered this in my life. I've lost this incredible amount of weight. I've figured out, what I need to do to be healthy in my mind and in my body and all these things. And it's like now I start to think about like, well, what else could I do that I didn't think I could do before? So that's my question to you. What do you think?
Yeah, the what's next question. I feel like I'm always asking myself that of like, what's next? Like, because I think that's a huge part of it is I've spent so much of my life focusing on losing weight and like being, that this version of myself. So it's weird now that I'm here where it's like, oh, I found this authentic self. Like she's so cool. Like, what's next? So I'm constantly asking myself that question. I think like a piece that's kind of for me is truly finding like authenticity and then being stable in that. So I think a lot of my work now is on like that healing work. And I think that where I'm at now that I never thought that I would be is truly loving myself. And I think that that's something like growing up, I never was like, oh, I love myself. Oh, I love my body. Like that was not a sentence that I said to myself. I was my own worst bully growing up, and still kind of am my worst critic at times. But that's something that I am internally grateful for is that love, just the love for myself. And I think that in itself is it's my biggest win from Brightline eating is that I get to show up and like my smiles are authentic. I get to laugh and, all the time and it be like truly something that like I'm showing up and joyful all the time as well. So that's something that I really am grateful for. And I think I just ventured off totally your question. So I hope I answered it. I went
totally
on a tangent
did.
there.
I think that was a great answer to the question, 100%. So, we kind of already, I'm looking through questions, guys. That's what I'm doing. I'm looking through questions. We kind of already answered the how's it impacted other parts of your life. So I think we could skip past this one. And I think that this is a good one. Have you had a significant life challenge since being in BLE? And if so, how did it affect your food? And I know you've kind of talked about not being necessarily, a crystal vaser, as Tony Wood likes to say.
I love it.
Yeah.
I think the biggest transition is like I'm on my own now. Like I have stepped into adulthood. Like that's kind of been the biggest thing for me is and what that brings with it of
and
like
you live in a different city than the rest of your family, right? Is that
right?
Yes. Okay.
Yep.
That's what,
yeah. Yep. So I took that leap and I'm not far by any means. My parents probably think that I'm across the country, but I'm really just a 45-minute flight away from them. And they visit often. But I think that was a huge leap for me was moving away from them and stepping into this like adult life and really exploring what that looks like. And in that came, things of like getting my budget under control and finances. And that was stressful in itself. And, then, okay, now I'm working a full-time job and I'm, now having to fill my groceries or, fill my fridge, and then now navigate like the social piece too of being my age as well. So that's kind of been a challenge for me. Like when life really gets lifey, it's when I venture out of my like safe little hermit self in my home and my routine, and I go and out into sometimes the world, and it's like, whoa, wait a second, this is not actually safe. So I think that's when like life gets lifey the most for me, is that when I try to be like everyone else, or I try and venture outside of what I know is successful for me. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and then Bonnie and Robin, you might want to talk to this a little bit too. When you were talking, I was just thinking about, and not that being someone who's, of a greater age than you changes, like we still, obviously we still have social situations that we're in that, we struggle with. I mean, dating occurs, yeah, after your
Yeah.
20s. Like
Yeah.
all this stuff is happening, but I think that there's maybe I'm wrong, but I think that maybe as you age, like we're all kind of get in the same boat of like we're concentrating on our health and we're thinking about that. Whereas like I know for me in my 20s, I was not thinking about being healthy at all. That was the last thing on my
Your
mind.
way. I'm so grateful that that you had your mom, I guess, as the example, and that you had your crucible moment so early, because I think,
Yes.
you were talking about that, how some people just haven't lived enough life. And I think my husband and I will often have, just look at each other and think, we'll be talking about a certain NMF issue and say, man, I had so many of those. Like I ran the experiment many, many times. Like I know what it tastes like. I know what it feels like. I know what I feel like after that. And I don't want to do that to myself anymore, but it's because I've done it so many times. So kudos to you that, you figured this out so early, because it's just going to enrich your life so much more to have this understanding of yourself, so much earlier.
Well,
That's
and
just
that's what I was thinking, to circle back to what we were talking about with, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to do this for another 60 years. But I think the beauty of that is that you will have all those years of having the experiences under your belt of, I know how to deal with life when it gets lifey. I know how to talk to people that aren't in the program, right? If you're going out on dates, right, you'll have the experience of, yep, I've got my 30-second elevator pitch on, how I eat and why I don't, eat this or drink that. And that, right, and that really strong, right, my running joke of, big self energy of, and I'm good with who I am. And so anyone that's going to be in your life needs to be cool with who you are as well.
Right. Yeah. And that's been like one of my biggest projects right now, is like how to, if it's a one-liner or if it's like something that I can do or say to really like bring in that piece of, who I am, like that big energy self that I am. Cause that's like the hardest part when you get in those settings, and I could give myself an hour pep talk, and then I get in the moment and someone's like, oh, do you want this NMF or NMD? I'm like, yep, sure. Sounds great. And so it's taking those like little moments, and it's happened where I'm like, I know that an only way for me to get through that in a healthy way is to just truly have awareness of like, okay, I did that. Why did I feel like I had to do that? And what can I do differently next time? Like, what's a little one-liner that I can sneak in there? So it's learning like those baby steps. I do feel like I tell people all this time, like, I feel like I have found like this secret, recipe to success, or, whatever you may call it, that it's like or the key, I guess, the key to, for my life, as an individual, the key to happiness for me, it's through this. So yeah.
So let's talk about, I mean, I know you said that, you've had slips before. So let's talk about like when those slips happen, what does that look like? How do you recover from that? How do you resume? And then also like, do you have an emergency action plan? And if you do, what does that look like? And how do you implement it?
Yeah. I know that a huge part of the community it is involved or has experience with binge eating, and I was never actually like, someone never actually like sat down with me and was like, you have a binge eating disorder. But I definitely would say that I had through growing up, those tendencies and those habits for binging. And so when it comes to my slips now, I would say I'll insert there that since coming all the way in last May, I have not had the huge binges, which I'm very grateful for. And I think a part of that comes with like surrendering and be like, okay, now I am an addict, and I just have to be aware of it. So I think that piece was huge for me. But my slips now, they truly come like when I am in a setting and I'm not prepared. If I'm not prepared for something, or I haven't reached out to someone and come in and said, this is what I'm doing, here's my plan, and so on and so forth, that's when it just gets too easy. Those permission giving thoughts get too loud, where I'm like, okay, we're not prepared, next time we'll try. So I think for me, I've learned, one, to, if anything comes up, to reach out to someone and be like, here's what's happening, here's where my thoughts are. I'll check back in. And sometimes that's all I need, to be like, okay, I hear these permission giving thoughts, let's just stay on course. And then, another piece of it too is truly just gentleness. I have found that like, I cannot be that like drill sergeant, individual for my life. I have a part that's like that. And for that reason, I have to be very gentle on myself when it comes to those slips. Because if I'm not, then I'm just going to say, well, tough luck, we'll try again next year type of conversation. And so gentleness is a huge key for me. And then just being honest, because as someone who grew up hiding from food, or hiding food from people, and, not being honest with myself, just being honest about those slips too has helped. But I think as far as emergency action plans go for me, the top of that list is one, taking a pause, like a second, because in most of those, it's my brain is going like 100 miles a minute, and I just need to take a pause and just see if there's something else that I'm needing. And usually I can identify something. It's usually connection with myself, or connection with someone that I love. So cute.
Yeah, but that's a really great point.
Yeah. And then another one, that I enjoy implementing, is probably second on my list, is movement of some kind. Sometimes my body just needs to get up and move. Sometimes I just need to either move from a room, shake my body out, jump around, dance around. And for some reason, for me in my emergency action plan, that seems to help, and it just gets my mind off of those thoughts. And then I am someone who uses prayer as well, right? Like it's a moment where I have to say, okay, this is something that's overwhelming me and I need help. Can you, is there a higher power, whatever someone may believe for me, what is it that I need in this moment? Is that prayer? And usually it's answered right away. Whether that be like a random phone call for someone, or someone comes into my office and, distracts me from whatever it is. So those are big things for me when it comes to those like the emergency action plan, for that. And then afterwards, like if it's truly all else has failed, then we have a conversation afterwards. Like, okay, like nothing worked just now. Like, why is that?
Right. The Monday morning quarterbacking of that.
Yeah.
The things that I reached for didn't work. How do I, look at that and evaluate what I might want to do differently next time?
Right. Yeah.
So if you could say one thing to your former self when you were thinking about getting on BLE, but you weren't quite ready, what would you go back and want to tell yourself?
Yeah. I think that, there's a few things that come to mind. One is just to like hang in there, like just hang in just a little bit longer. Would probably be just like that patience piece of it too. And thinking, I'm never going to get better. It's never going to get easier. I'm going to be like this forever, where it's like, let's just be patient for a second And it'll something, it's coming. So that's probably a big one. And I think the other one is, just to like that my life at that time was not meant to be fixed. It was meant to be felt. Like, I think that's a big thing for me, is that like I, in those moments, was like, what is the quickest fix? What can I do to lose the weight the fastest? When in reality, like I just needed to feel things. I wasn't feeling emotions. I wasn't feeling what I was doing or what I was, moving towards. I was just kind of cruising in life. So I think just to take that moment and just let's just try to feel for a second into our bodies.
So that awareness that, so many people are like, okay, but how do I get to the other side? Because I want to be at the other side. I don't want to be where I am, because where I am is so incredibly uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But that awareness that going through the process is actually what leads to growth.
Yeah. Yeah. And it took people holding my hands in those moments, absolutely, because it's in those moments that it's like the hardest, scariest emotions to feel are the ones that like take the longest to go, for us to go through. But that is where I've learned some of my toughest lessons, when I've heard myself say like I mean, right before stepping into Brightline Eating, I had this very real, deep conversation with my mom, where it could, from an outside perspective, I said all of the things like, I'm not a food addict. I don't want to be in Brightline Eating. I don't need it. I don't need the support. Like I could hear myself, but it was in those like the toughest emotions that I learned, like, okay, let's feel through that, because that's an active part that's coming up, that we need to feel through that one. Yeah.
But a really important point of being willing to sit with that discomfort to get the lesson out of it.
Yeah. And then
And I
just
think,
giving,
sorry, go
you're
ahead.
good. I was going to say that like my aunt tells me this all the time, is like, what is your 20%? Like in those really tough moments, like what can I give myself that's at least 20%? And a part of that too is like, okay, my 3 meals, that's a part of my 20%. Like drinking water is a part of my 20%. Like of those really hard emotions and that trying to get through them. What is the smallest amount that I can do for myself? Because it's really hard. Like in those moments, you want to it's like the New Year's resolution, like January 1st. All right, this is it. I'm going to do all the things and it's going to get better. That never works, or hasn't worked for me. So it's those baby steps every day of like just truly taking a baby step towards something, and just staying bright. Yeah.
I mean, I'm just so dang impressed. I wish when I was your age, I would have figured this all out. I'm just like, wow, had I been 25 and figured this out, this would have been lovely. No.
The comment, I didn't need to be fixed. I needed to feel is just so prescient for all of us.
Yeah.
That's just
Well, and I think that's something that I
right.
definitely have discovered, like that's been a discovery of me over the last year in my Brightline Eating journey, is like, I was and have numbed out with food for my entire life, right? And it wasn't other drugs, it wasn't alcohol, it was always food. Not that there wasn't alcohol and other things. I'm just saying, like, it was always food for me. And having that component taken away has brought me to a place of like, yeah, I have to feel now. But it's good and bad, right? Like that's the other thing, is like, I think that, the really I guess the encouraging thing in all this is like, the good feelings are also turned up too. It's not just the bad feelings, so, but being able to sit with them, I think it's just such a new skill that I have learned. And it sounds like you have, that you're learning. And I continue to learn in Brightline Eating. So yeah, it's incredible. It really is. Maija, just, that you, like I said, are figuring this out at this point. So
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, it definitely feels surreal, honestly, to be like, I think it's like that natural like imposter syndrome that comes out, that's like, who am I to be like on a podcast, or to be, but it's anyone could do it,
who
right?
are
Like
we?
yeah.
We're not anybody either. Come on. Like, we're just three people that have some mics. Like, we're not anybody.
Free wisdom for everybody else. So that's why we're right.
Ah.
That is wonderful.
Okay, so here's a fun question. I'm sorry, guys. I'm trying to, juggle a billion things right now. What did you want to be when you grew up? And do you even know what you want to be when you grow up?
Like, am I grown up yet?
No, I don't. I'm 43 and I'm not grown up. Whatever. We're advocating for not growing up at all. But if you had a dream when you were a child of something, what was that? What was that dream?
I think the one that comes to mind growing up was I always wanted to be a chef, which is like ironic. Like I grew up like instead of cartoons, I was watching Food Network, and like instead of like having regular birthday parties, like I wanted like a chopped birthday party. And so I always wanted something involving food to be in my profession, which it's ironic now, but I love to cook. That's a huge part of like, I love to cook and I love to plate meals. And when it comes to like an environment, I love to be in the kitchen, and I found ways to navigate that like in a healthy way now. But yeah, I think that was when I was younger, I always wanted to be a cook, or like a GI Joe, like a badass GI Joe, like just like this cool. I don't think I could
like her anymore until she just made that comment. Now I like her even more.
I'm holding out for the GI Joe. Yes. I'm holding out.
The real American hero. I love it.
Yeah.
Goodness. Oh goodness. Okay. Robin and Bonnie, I'm just going through the questions here. You guys, please feel free to interject if you have anything to say.
One thing came up earlier with the you were talking about when you were first talking to your mom about, you were ready to start, and you mentioned that, you told her and she just said okay and didn't say a lot of things. And I thought that was really great, because sometimes, especially with our kids or people we love, we want to fix things for them. And we've had this conversation on the podcast before about kind of, once you get Brightline eating, you become like an evangelist to Brightline eating. It's kind of obnoxious, and it's actually not what helps people. I mean, like, there's nothing that'll turn someone off faster than shove it down their throat. So I'm like, have you talked to your mom since about like what was she thinking when you kind of first brought that to her, and how did she restrain herself from just like
jumping up with
sounding?
I mean, I think she gave me enough excitement for me to be excited, but not in like that overexcited, like, if you don't do this, I won't love you type of conversation, which that was the narrative. Like when I was doing like the slight line eating for so long, like that was a tough part of our relationship or a tough period of our relationship because I was so worried that like I would be letting her down or that I couldn't tell her the truth of what I was doing. And so she thought I was doing Brightline eating perfectly for so long because I would present that way of like, oh yeah, I'm totally squeaky clean bright. I'm not. But like I wasn't telling her that. And so it was that really tough conversation we had where it was like, I finally let it out where I was like, Mom, I'm not fully bright. I'm not doing this. It's not working. And she was like, I still love you. Like it was, so that was like I think that was like a huge piece for me for our relationship specifically. And then how I kind of navigate when people ask me about it. It's like, my mom doesn't hold authority over my program or what I'm doing. She's truly just like someone to hold my hand and walk alongside me. And so it wasn't until we had that really uncomfortable conversation where it was like, here's how I feel. I feel like you are, have authority over me, or if I don't do this, we won't be similar. Cause that was another thing growing up of me and my mom, as as food addiction can do, it can be passed down. Me and my mom were always called mini me's. Like I was always my mom's mini me. We were always like one and the same for a lot of people. And so it was kind of like that. And that moment for me to just say like, I want to be your mini me, but I also want like this authority over my own program and my own life. And so that was it was a very challenging conversation that we had, but it was probably one of the most beautiful conversations because now we are just cheering each other on. Like we know that our programs are drastically different, but we also hold like those core values as well. So she, in fact, still loves me when I break my lines, when I'm not perfect. But also she's one of the most encouraging, beautiful human beings in this world who runs her program in a way that's fit for her. So yeah, Side tangent again. Go Shelley.
Yes, go Shelley. We love you, Shelley. No, but I think I think that that's so important. And I think overarching in the community as well, not just your mom, but your mom is amazing and is all the things that you say. But I think in the community as well, this idea of we have to be perfect in order to show up, and we can't show up otherwise. I don't feel like that's true. I don't feel like that's the way that BLE, is ever presented, or anybody is, no one needs to be perfect to show up in the community. So it is really encouraging. I agree. And I know that my guess is you're probably a little bit of a type A personality. So admitting that you weren't perfect was probably really hard. Oh, there's a little one, coming right in. Sorry
In a
about that,
blanket
everybody.
too.
I know. So the last question we have for you is, what's next for you? What's the next chapter in your life? We'd love to hear about that.
Yeah. I feel like stepping into, I just turned 25. He can join us whenever. I love babies, so he's totally fine.
No, it's my mama bear self just trying to protect my kids from the internet. That's it.
That's true. Fair. I just turned 25 last month, and so I feel like I'm stepping into like this whole like year of transition and transformation. I think that now that I kind of have my food under control and I'm, growing and healing and doing all these things, now I'm kind of looking outside of the where I'm at right now in regards to possibilities. So I'm looking to kind of what's next for me is like, am I meant to be in Alaska forever? Am I meant to do the job that I'm doing right now forever, or is there something else out there for me that I can go and explore? So I think that Brightlining has allowed some availability in my brain to now go seek possibilities, and what it looks like, and know that like my food will follow, and my Brightlines will follow that. So that's kind of a big thing for me. And then just seeking connection and companionship as well, but like it being that like authentic, deep, connections with people, in regards to like friendships and support, and who can I connect with, and who, all of the things.
Yeah. Well, that is just amazing. Bonnie, Robin, do you guys have anything you want to add?
So much for your time this afternoon. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
It was super great to get to meet you. And I'm so encouraged and so excited that you've done all this work at your age already. It's just wonderful. Really, just really wonderful. Yeah. I'm glad the program was able to reach you, and hopefully, you and the few others, that are in the program, we can expand that and reach a lot more people, because and if we can help people at your age to make this better, and get the food handled, and get a hold of the addiction issue, it just opens up the rest of your life for a lot of good things. So
absolutely.
Robin,
I just think that's a great message to bring to younger people, that it is possible to navigate that.
Yeah. Here, it is possible at this age. It is possible.
Yeah. Okay, sorry guys. And on that note, just trying to keep the kids out of the room. Anyway, so I think to wrap up, I think that Maija, you are just a shining example, and it's not because you have a perfect program. Like I think that's a great message to get across. It's not about perfection. It's about working this program. I think that just from a mental health perspective too, it sounds like you're just so super grounded, and it's so encouraging. I think that, Bonnie, Robin, and I, starting a podcast, our idea was to reach as many people as we can, and to diversify the community as much as we could. And so we just really appreciate you and your perspective, and what it is, because it's a different perspective than any of us have, because we weren't exposed to this at the age that you were. So I'm excited to see what the next years have for you, and that we're connected is just amazing. So that is our episode today of On the Brightline, with me and my craziness going on in my house. But thank you all for joining us. And as always, if you have any show ideas, topics, or guest ideas, whatever, just shoot them our way on the Brightline podcast at gmail.com or hit us up on our socials. Thank you and have a beautiful day.